I am Amanda Wilson, 39 years old, and I never thought my own parents would be capable of such betrayal. For 18 years, I worked multiple jobs to help my daughter Haley save for college. Every extra penny went into her fund. When my parents told her they needed emergency surgery money, she gave them everything, $37,000. Then I discovered they had bought my niece a brand new car with that exact amount. My daughter was devastated. Her future stolen by her own grandparents. Before I tell you how my own parents destroyed my daughter's future, take a second to like and subscribe if you have ever had family betray your trust. Now let me tell you what happened. Growing up, I always believed family meant unconditional love and support. That belief was tested when I became pregnant with Haley at 21. Instead of offering help, my parents, Harold and Eleanor Wilson, turned their backs on me. Their disappointment was palpable. Dad slammed doors. Mom cried for days. Their perfect daughter had ruined her life, according to them. My sister Diane was always the golden child. 4 years older than me, she did everything right in their eyes. Perfect grades, perfect boyfriend from a wealthy family, perfect career path in medicine. Meanwhile, I was the wild child, the creative one, the disappointment. When I announced my pregnancy, it only confirmed what they had always believed about me. Irresponsible, impulsive, a failure. I moved out of their house and into a tiny studio apartment. Those early years were incredibly difficult. I worked as a waitress during the day and took online classes at night, all while caring for a newborn. Sleep became a luxury I rarely enjoyed. The apartment was freezing in winter and sweltering in summer, but it was ours. I promised Haley that someday things would be better. By the time Haley was 5, I had earned my associate degree and found a job as an administrative assistant at a local marketing firm. The pay was still modest, but it offered stability and benefits. We moved into a slightly larger apartment with heating that actually worked. That same year, I opened Haley's college fund with just $50. It seemed almost laughable at the time, but it was a start. While my relationship with my parents remained strained, they did begin to show interest in Haley as she grew older. They would send birthday cards with $20 bills tucked inside. Occasionally, they would invite us for Sunday dinner, though these gatherings were always tense. My father would inevitably make some comment about how I could have done so much more with my life, while my mother would sigh and change the subject. Diane married her college sweetheart Bradley when Haley was 7. They had a daughter, Chloe, 2 years later. The contrast between how my parents treated Chloe and Haley was subtle but unmistakable. Chloe received lavish gifts for every occasion. Haley got practical items, if anything at all. Chloe was invited to stay at their house for weeks during summer. Haley was welcome for carefully timed day visits. Despite these challenges, Haley thrived. She inherited my creativity, but paired it with a discipline and focus I never possessed. By elementary school, her teachers were calling her gifted. In middle school, she was placed in advanced classes. She developed a passion for science and mathematics that amazed me. My daughter was brilliant, determined, and kind-hearted, despite having every reason not to be. I continued to work my way up at the marketing firm, eventually becoming a project manager. Each promotion meant a little more could go into the college fund. When Haley turned 16, she got a part-time job at the local library and insisted on contributing part of her paycheck to her own education fund. I was so proud of her dedication, but also felt guilty that she had to work, while her cousin Chloe spent summers at expensive camps and winter breaks at ski resorts. By her senior year of high school, Haley had maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA. She was active in the science club, volunteered at an animal shelter, and still worked weekends at the library. Her guidance counselor encouraged her to apply to top universities. When the acceptance letter from Cornell University arrived, along with a partial scholarship, we both cried with joy. It would still be expensive, but between the scholarship and her college fund now containing $37,000, it seemed possible. Strangely, as Haley's success became undeniable, my parents seemed to warm toward us. They attended her high school graduation and even hosted a small party afterward. My father toasted to her bright future. My mother hugged her and said she was proud. I was cautiously optimistic that perhaps they had finally recognized Haley's worth and by extension accepted my choices. Maybe time had softened their judgment. What I did not realize was that their apparent change of heart was setting the stage for an act of betrayal I could never have imagined. As Haley grew closer to them during her senior year, sharing her dreams and plans, they were taking notes. They were learning exactly what mattered most to her, exactly what she had worked for, exactly what they could take away. I should have trusted my instincts. The slight discomfort I felt when my father asked detailed questions about Haley's college fund. The unease when my mother insisted on having Haley's phone number for emergencies. The nagging feeling that something was off when they invited Haley for lunch without extending the invitation to me. But I wanted so badly to believe that they had changed, that they finally saw the amazing young woman my daughter had become. I wanted her to have the grandparents she deserved. That desire to heal old wounds blinded me to the danger right in front of us. The betrayal began on a Tuesday in July, just 6 weeks before Haley was scheduled to leave for college. I had been sent on a business trip to Chicago to meet with an important client. It was only the second business trip of my career, and I was both nervous and excited about the opportunity. Before leaving, I made sure Haley had everything she needed for the 3 days I would be gone. At 18, she was perfectly capable of taking care of herself, but old habits die hard. I called her from my hotel room that first night. She sounded distracted but assured me everything was fine. The second night, she did not answer my call until nearly midnight, claiming she had fallen asleep early. Something felt off, but I chalked it up to pre-college jitters or perhaps even a bit of teenage rebellion before leaving home. What I did not know then was that my parents had shown up at our apartment just hours after my departure. According to what Haley later told me, they arrived looking visibly distressed. My mother had clearly been crying, her eyes red and puffy. My father was pale and moved slowly, clutching occasionally at his chest in a way that immediately alarmed Haley. They asked to come inside, and of course Haley welcomed them. She made them tea while they sat at our small kitchen table, my father breathing heavily, as if each breath was painful. Finally, my mother broke down in tears and explained the reason for their unexpected visit. My father, she claimed, had been diagnosed with a serious heart condition that required immediate surgery. The procedure was scheduled for the following week, but their insurance was refusing to cover it, calling it experimental. Without the surgery, the doctors had allegedly given my father just months to live. They needed $35,000 by Friday to secure the surgical slot, or it would go to another patient. Haley, stunned by this news, asked why they had not called me. That was when the manipulation deepened. My father explained that they had not wanted to worry me when I was focused on this important business trip. My mother added that they knew how hard I had been working and did not want to add to my stress. They suggested that perhaps Haley could help them temporarily, and they would tell me everything when I returned. When Haley hesitated, my father clutched his chest again and winced in apparent pain. My mother rushed to his side, tears streaming down her face. How could any 18-year-old faced with her grandfather seemingly dying before her eyes refuse to help? Especially when they promised it was just a temporary loan until they could sort things out with their insurance or access some of their investments that were temporarily tied up. Still, Haley showed remarkable presence of mind. She asked if they had tried to get a loan from the bank. They claimed they had been denied due to my father's recent business setbacks. She suggested they ask my sister Diane for help. They said Diane was in Europe with her husband and unreachable. For every solution Haley proposed, they had a ready answer for why it would not work. The most insidious part of their manipulation came when my father took Haley's hand and told her how proud he was of her, how she was going to change the world with her brilliant mind, how this surgery would allow him to live long enough to see her graduate from college. My mother added that they had always regretted how they had treated me when I was younger and wanted a chance to make things right, to be there for both of us in the future. They spent nearly 2 hours wearing down Haley's resistance, 2 hours of emotional manipulation by the people who should have been protecting her. 2 hours of increasingly desperate pleas until finally, heartbroken at the thought of losing her grandfather and believing she was doing the right thing, Haley agreed to help. The very next morning, they drove her to the bank. Haley later told me that she had almost called me several times the night before but stopped herself, remembering how stressed I had been about this business trip and not wanting to worry me with a family emergency I could do nothing about. from Chicago. At the bank, she withdrew $37,000, the entire college fund we had spent 18 years building. My parents had instructed her to get a cashier's check rather than cash, claiming it was safer. They hugged her tightly outside the bank, my father with tears in his eyes, promising that this sacrifice would not be in vain. They assured her they would pay her back as soon as possible, certainly before her tuition payment was due. My mother even suggested they might be able to add interest to thank her for her help. After they left with the check, Haley felt an initial wave of relief. Her grandfather would get his surgery. He would live. She had done the right thing. That relief was followed almost immediately by anxiety. She had just emptied her entire college fund without consulting me. What if my parents could not pay her back in time? What if Cornell rescinded her partial scholarship when they did not receive the tuition payment? What if her entire future had just been derailed? Those fears led her to do something she had never done before. She began to clean the apartment obsessively, as if controlling her physical environment could somehow restore the control she felt she had lost over her future. That was how I found her, when I returned home 2 days later, scrubbing the bathroom tiles with a toothbrush at 11 at night. I returned from Chicago late Thursday evening, exhausted but satisfied with how the client meetings had gone. When I opened the door to our apartment, I was hit by the sharp smell of cleaning products. Every surface gleamed. The floors had been mopped. The windows sparkled. Even the baseboards had been scrubbed. This level of cleaning was completely out of character for Haley, who had always been tidy but never obsessive. I found her in the bathroom on her hands and knees, scrubbing grout with a toothbrush. Her knuckles were raw and there were dark circles under her eyes. When she saw me, she burst into tears. Alarmed, I dropped my suitcase and knelt beside her, taking the toothbrush from her hand. Something is very wrong, I thought. In all her 18 years, I had rarely seen Haley cry, and never like this. Between sobs, she tried to explain what had happened, but her story was disjointed and confusing. Something about Grandpa being sick. Something about the college fund. My mind could not process what she was saying. I guided her to the living room and sat her down on the couch. I made her a cup of tea and waited until she had calmed down enough to speak clearly. Then, with growing horror, I listened as she recounted the visit from my parents and their tragic story about my father needing emergency heart surgery. My first instinct was disbelief. My father had mentioned nothing about heart problems during our last conversation. My mother, who called me at least once a week with updates about extended family members' health issues, had said nothing about my father seeing a doctor. It made no sense. Then again, they had kept serious matters from me before. Perhaps they really had not wanted to worry me while I was on my business trip. Perhaps they really were planning to pay Haley back. I wanted to believe the best of them, even as a cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. I tried calling my parents immediately. The call went straight to voicemail. I called again. Same result. I sent a text asking them to call me as soon as possible regarding my father's health. No response. I called the local hospital and asked if Harold Wilson was a patient there. He was not. I called another hospital in the next town over. Again, no record of him. Haley watched my face as I made these calls, her expression shifting from concern to confusion. I tried to reassure her that we would figure this out, but my voice lacked conviction. Next, I called my sister Diane. She did not answer either. I left a message asking about our father's health and the surgery. Then I tried her husband Bradley. Voicemail again. It was nearly midnight by then, too late to continue calling around. I told Haley we would sort everything out in the morning. I encouraged her to get some sleep, promising that no matter what happened with the money, we would find a way for her to attend Cornell as planned. She nodded but did not look convinced. Neither was I. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with possibilities each more disturbing than the last. By morning, I had decided to drive to my parents' house. It was about an hour away in the suburb where I had grown up. Before we left, I checked social media, something I rarely did these days. There, on my sister Diane's page, was the answer to the mystery. Posted just 12 hours earlier was a photo of my niece Chloe standing beside a brand new red Audi convertible, a giant bow on the hood. She was beaming, holding up a set of keys. The caption read, Someone just got her dream car for her 16th birthday, so proud of our amazing daughter. In the background of the photo, partially visible, was a birthday card. Even from the angle of the photo, I could make out the words, "From Grandma and Grandpa with love." My blood ran cold. I zoomed in on the image. The car was a 2024 Audi A3 Cabriolet. A quick internet search confirmed what I already suspected. The starting price, $37,000. I showed the photo to Haley, who stared at it in silence for several long moments. Then she ran to the bathroom and threw up. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, rubbing her back as she retched my own shock, giving way to a rage unlike anything I had ever experienced. There had been no heart condition, no emergency surgery, no insurance issues. My parents had manipulated their 18-year-old granddaughter into giving them her entire college fund so they could buy their other granddaughter a luxury convertible for her 16th birthday. When Haley had emptied herself completely, she sat back against the wall, pale and shaking. "I want to die," she whispered. "I worked so hard for that money. How could they do this to me?" I had no answer for her. I could not comprehend this level of cruelty myself. I helped her to her bed and brought her water. Once she had fallen into an exhausted sleep, I returned to my computer and continued my investigation. Further scrolling through Diane's social media revealed more photos from Chloe's birthday party the previous day. There were my parents smiling broadly as Chloe hugged them. My father looked remarkably healthy for someone supposedly on death's door. In another photo, they were all eating cake on my parents' patio. The timestamp showed it was taken just hours after they had collected the check from Haley. I printed these photos as evidence. Then I found the receipt for Haley's withdrawal in her purse. $37,000, the exact amount we had saved. The exact cost of Chloe's new car. There could be no coincidence. When Haley woke hours later, her initial shock had hardened into something else. A deep hurt that made her seem suddenly older than her 18 years. "We need to confront them," she said quietly. "We need to get my money back." I agreed. I called in sick to work, something I had done perhaps 3 times in my entire career. Then Haley and I got into my car and drove to my parents' house, the printed photos and bank withdrawal receipt in my purse. I did not call ahead. I did not want to give them time to prepare their lies. The drive to my parents' suburban home was silent. Haley stared out the window, occasionally wiping away tears that fell, despite her obvious efforts to control them. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My thoughts oscillated between disbelief that my parents could be so cruel and fury at what they had done to my daughter. Their house was the same one I had grown up in, a spacious colonial in an upscale neighborhood. The lawn was perfectly manicured, the flower beds precisely arranged. Everything about it projected stability and respectability. How many neighbors, I wondered, knew what kind of people really lived behind that glossy red door? Both cars were in the driveway, my father's BMW sedan and my mother's Lexus SUV. They were home. I parked on the street and took a deep breath, trying to center myself. "Be calm," I told Haley. "No matter what they say, we need to stay calm and focused." She nodded, her face set in an expression of determination that broke my heart. No 18-year-old should have to face this kind of betrayal from people who were supposed to love and protect her. I rang the doorbell, the same chime I had heard thousands of times growing up. My mother answered, her surprise at seeing us quickly masked by a practiced smile. "Amanda, Haley, what a lovely surprise," she exclaimed as if we were dropping by for a casual visit. Come in, come in. Your father is just watching the game in the den." We followed her inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and furniture polish, just as it always had. In the den, my father was indeed watching football, a glass of whiskey on the side table beside him. He looked up as we entered, momentarily startled before recovering. "Amanda," he said, muting the television. "What brings you to?" By no hello for Haley. No acknowledgement of the last time they had seen her, when they had spun their web of lies and taken her money. I decided to give them one chance to confess. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice level. "How are you feeling?" "Fine, fine," he replied, waving dismissively. "Just the usual aches and pains of getting older. Nothing a good whiskey cannot fix." He chuckled, taking a sip from his glass. "So no heart condition?" I pressed. No emergency surgery scheduled for this week. My parents exchanged a quick glance. My mother laughed nervously. "What are you talking about, dear?" she asked. I removed the photos from my purse and placed them on the coffee table. "These were taken yesterday," I said, "at Chloe's birthday party, where you gave her a brand new Audi convertible." My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. My mother busied herself straightening magazines that were already perfectly aligned on the table. The same day, I continued placing the bank withdrawal receipt beside the photos that you convinced Haley to give you her entire college fund for a surgery that never existed. The silence that followed was deafening. My father cleared his throat. "Now, Amanda," he began, his tone patronizing, "I think there has been a misunderstanding." Haley stepped forward, her voice surprisingly steady. "You told me Grandpa was dying," she said. "You said you needed $37,000 for a surgery the insurance would not cover. You made me promise not to tell my mom because it would stress her out. You said you would pay me back before tuition was due." My mother had the audacity to look offended. "Haley, sweetheart, that is not exactly what happened," she said. "We did ask for your help, yes, but it was only meant to be a temporary loan. We fully intend to pay you back." When I demanded, "Her tuition payment is due in 3 weeks." My father stood up, his previous pretense of confusion giving way to defensiveness. "These things take time, Amanda," he said sternly. "We have some investments we need to liquidate. We cannot just produce that kind of money overnight." "But you could produce it overnight to buy Chloe a luxury car," I countered. "That was different," my mother interjected. "We had been planning that for months. It was a special occasion." "And Haley's college education is not special?" I asked incredulously. My father scoffed. "College is not for everyone," he said dismissively. "Plenty of successful people never get a degree. Look at Bill Gates." I felt Haley stiffen beside me. All her life she had dreamed of going to college. She had worked harder than any teenager I knew to make that dream a reality. And now my father was suggesting it did not matter. "Haley has a full scholarship to Cornell," I reminded them, though it was only a partial scholarship. I was too angry to be precise. "This is not about whether college is valuable. This is about you stealing her money." "Stealing is a very serious accusation," my mother said, her voice taking on the icy tone I remembered from my childhood whenever I had disappointed her. "Haley gave us that money willingly. She is 18, an adult, capable of making her own decisions." "Because you lied to her," I exclaimed, my composure slipping. "You manipulated her with a fake medical emergency." My father slammed his whiskey glass down on the table. "That is enough, Amanda," he thundered. "I will not be spoken to this way in my own home. If you must know, we did Haley a favor. That fancy university would just fill her head with liberal nonsense anyway. She is better off starting at community college like you did." I felt like I had been slapped. So that was it. After all these years, they still saw me as a disappointment, a cautionary tale. And they were determined to make Haley follow the same path regardless of her own dreams and accomplishments. But it was what my father said next that truly revealed the depth of their prejudice. "Besides," he added, looking directly at Haley, "Chloe is real family. She has Wilson blood. You are just the result of Amanda's mistake with that boy who disappeared as soon as he found out she was pregnant." Haley gasped, tears filling her eyes. She had never heard her grandparents speak so cruelly about her parentage. I had always tried to shield her from their more hurtful comments. Before I could respond, Haley turned and ran from the room. I heard the front door open and close as she fled the house. Part of me wanted to scream at my parents to release all the rage and hurt I felt in that moment. But I knew it would accomplish nothing. Instead, I gathered the photos and receipt from the table and returned them to my purse. I looked at my parents, these people who had raised me but who remained strangers in all the ways that mattered. "I will not forget this," I said quietly. "And I will not let you destroy Haley's future." Then I walked out, closing the door firmly behind me. I found Haley sitting on the curb next to my car, her arms wrapped around her knees. I sat beside her and pulled her close. "It will be okay," I promised her. "I do not know how yet, but we will make this right." The drive home from my parents' house was as silent as the drive there had been, but the quality of the silence had changed. Instead of shock and disbelief, we were now processing anger and determination. Haley stared straight ahead occasionally, wiping away tears but no longer sobbing. I could almost see the wheels turning in her mind as she tried to make sense of what had happened. Back at our apartment, I made us both tea, a ritual that had become our way of dealing with difficult situations over the years. Haley cupped her hands around the mug but did not drink. "What are we going to do?" she asked finally. "Cornell expects the first tuition payment in 3 weeks. If I do not pay, I lose my spot and my scholarship." I took a deep breath. First, I said we are going to explore all our options. "I promise you, Haley, you are going to Cornell as planned. I am not letting them take this from you." She looked skeptical, and I could not blame her. $37,000 was not a sum I could easily replace, especially not in 3 weeks, but I was determined to find a way. The next morning, I called Stephanie Rivera, an attorney I had met through a marketing project a few years earlier. We had stayed in touch occasionally, meeting for coffee. She specialized in family law and had always struck me as both compassionate and shrewd, exactly the combination we needed now. Stephanie agreed to see us that afternoon. Her office was modest but professional, with degrees and certificates lining one wall and family photos on her desk. She listened carefully as I explained what had happened, taking notes, and occasionally asking Haley to clarify specific details about her conversation with my parents. When we finished, Stephanie leaned back in her chair, her expression grave. "This is certainly disturbing," she said. "Unfortunately, from a legal standpoint, it is complicated. Haley is 18, legally an adult. She voluntarily withdrew the money and gave it to your parents, even though they lied about the reason. Proving fraud would be difficult." My heart sank. "So there is nothing we can do?" I asked. "I did not say that," Stephanie replied. "While a straightforward lawsuit might be challenging, there are other approaches we could consider. Tell me more about your father's financial situation. You mentioned he referenced investments that needed to be liquidated." This question led us down an unexpected path. My father had always presented himself as financially successful, but I realized I knew very little about the specifics of his business dealings. He owned a commercial real estate company that had been moderately successful over the years, but beyond that, details were scarce. Stephanie suggested we do some research before deciding on our next steps. As we were leaving her office, she mentioned one other avenue we might want to explore. Sometimes, she said, financial pressure can be more effective than legal pressure. If your father has business associates or depends on his reputation in the community, that might be a vulnerability worth considering. Her words stayed with me as I drove Haley home. On impulse, I made a detour to visit my childhood friend Rachel Thompson. After college, Rachel had gone into banking and now worked as a loan officer at First National Bank, where my father had done business for years. Rachel was surprised but pleased to see us. After exchanging pleasantries, I explained our situation. Her friendly expression hardened as she listened. "What your parents did is inexcusable," she said firmly. "I cannot discuss your father's specific financial information, of course, but I can tell you that Harold Wilson Realty has faced some challenges in recent years. The commercial market has been volatile, and your father has made some questionable investments." That information was illuminating. Perhaps my parents' financial situation was not as secure as they pretended. Rachel could not share details, but she did suggest that a careful examination of my father's business practices might reveal irregularities that could be leveraged in our favor. Over the next few days, I took a week of vacation time from work, something I rarely did, and devoted myself to investigating my father's business. I searched public records for property transactions, tax assessments, and corporate filings. I reached out to former colleagues of my father under the guise of market research for a client. What emerged was a pattern of increasingly desperate business maneuvers. Several properties had been sold at suspicious discounts to shell companies that, with some digging, appeared to be connected to my father himself. There were indications of possible tax irregularities, with property values seemingly manipulated to reduce tax burdens. Armed with this preliminary information, I returned to Stephanie's office. She reviewed my findings with interest. "This gives us leverage," she confirmed. While I still think a direct lawsuit about Haley's money would be difficult to win, these business irregularities could potentially trigger investigations that your father would very much want to avoid. She outlined a plan. First, she would draft a formal demand letter requesting the return of Haley's money in full, citing the fraudulent circumstances under which it was obtained. The letter would not explicitly mention the business irregularities I had uncovered, but it would hint at the possibility of further legal actions that could have wide-ranging consequences. If my parents failed to respond appropriately to the letter, we would proceed with filing complaints with various regulatory agencies, including the State Real Estate Commission, the Tax Authority, and potentially even the district attorney's office if there was evidence of fraud. It was a calculated risk. My parents might call our bluff or they might retaliate in ways I had not anticipated. But weighing those risks against Haley's future, I felt we had no choice. I authorized Stephanie to prepare the letter. While Stephanie worked on the legal strategy, Haley and I focused on practical contingency plans. We applied for emergency student loans, though the amounts available would cover only a fraction of what she needed. I looked into taking out a home equity loan on our apartment, but as a renter that was not an option. I even considered selling my car and taking out a personal loan, though together these would still fall short of the amount we needed. Haley, meanwhile, threw herself into searching for additional scholarships, spending hours each day completing applications and writing essays. She also increased her hours at the library, though we both knew her minimum wage job could not meaningfully address the shortfall. One evening, as we sat at our kitchen table surrounded by loan applications and scholarship essays, Haley looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "This is not going to work, is it?" she asked quietly. "I am not going to be able to go to Cornell." I reached across the table and took her hand. "We are not giving up," I told her firmly. "We still have Stephanie's plan. And if that does not work, we will find another way. You might have to defer for a semester or start at community college and transfer later, but you will get your education. I promise you that." She nodded, not entirely convinced, but willing to trust me. In that moment, I silently renewed my determination to make this right, whatever it took. A week after our visit to my parents, Stephanie called to say the demand letter was ready. She had drafted a masterpiece of legal intimidation, formal and restrained on the surface, but carrying unmistakable undertones of threat. It detailed the fraudulent circumstances under which the money had been obtained, demanded its return within 10 days, and hinted at further legal actions that could expose my father's business practices to unwelcome scrutiny. "Do you want to deliver it yourself?" Stephanie asked. "Or shall I send it via certified mail?" I considered the options. I wanted to see their faces when they realized they would not get away with what they had done, but I also knew that another confrontation might become emotional and counterproductive. Have it delivered professionally, I decided, by a process server, someone who will make an impression but remain completely neutral. Stephanie agreed that was wise and said she would arrange for Maria Sanchez, a professional process server she often worked with, to deliver the letter the following day. All we could do now was wait and see how my parents would respond to this first formal move in our chess game of justice. Number. Part 7. The Consequences Unfold. The next 10 days were among the most stressful of my life. While waiting for my parents' response to the demand letter, Haley and I continued our parallel efforts to secure alternative funding for her education. I contacted Cornell's financial aid office to explain our situation and request an extension on the tuition deadline. They were sympathetic but firm. Without payment, Haley would lose her place and her scholarship. I made the difficult decision to list our apartment for sublet and began looking for a smaller, less expensive place. The rent difference would be minimal, but every dollar counted now. I also took on freelance marketing projects in the evenings after my regular job, working until midnight most nights. My eyes burned from staring at the computer screen, but the extra income would help even if it was not enough to solve our problem. Haley watched me with concern. "Mom, you are going to make yourself sick," she said one night, bringing me a cup of tea as I hunched over my laptop at 1 a.m. "I am fine," I assured her, though we both knew it was not true. "I am just doing what needs to be done." 3 days after the letter was delivered, my sister Diane called. I had not heard from her since before the confrontation at my parents' house. I braced myself before answering. What have you done? She demanded, without preamble. Dad is furious. He says you are threatening him with some kind of investigation. I explained what had happened as calmly as I could, from the fabricated heart condition to the theft of Haley's college fund to buy Chloe a luxury car. That is not how they told it, Diane said defensively. They said they borrowed some money from Haley temporarily and that you are blowing everything out of proportion. Did they mention that they told Haley that Dad was dying? I asked. That they needed the money for emergency surgery, that they specifically told her not to tell me about it. There was a pause on the line. Well, no, Diane admitted. But still, Amanda, threatening legal action against our parents investigating Dad's business. How could you? How could I not? I countered. They stole my daughter's future. What would you do if someone did that to Chloe? Another silence. That is different, she finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. Why? Because Chloe is real family. I quoted our father's cruel words back to her. Because she has Wilson blood. Diane gasped. Dad said that. To Haley. Yes, I confirmed. To her face. Right before she ran out of the house crying. I did not know, Diane said softly. Mom and Dad just said you were being unreasonable about a temporary loan. It was not a loan, I explained patiently. It was fraud. They lied to manipulate an 18-year-old into giving them her college fund. Then they spent it on a car for your daughter. A car that costs exactly the same amount they took from Haley. I will talk to them, Diane promised before hanging up. Whether she actually would or whether it would make any difference remained to be seen. On day 7, I received a cease and desist letter from my father's attorney, Gregory Marshall. The letter accused me of harassment, defamation, and making baseless threats. It demanded that I stop all attempts to contact my parents and retract any claims I had made about financial improprieties in my father's business. I forwarded the letter to Stephanie, who called me immediately. This is actually good news, she said, surprising me. It means they are worried. They would not have engaged an attorney if they were not concerned about what we might do next. Stephanie drafted a response to Attorney Marshall, reiterating our demand for the return of the money and pointing out that truth is an absolute defense against defamation claims. She also noted that we had not yet filed any formal complaints with regulatory agencies, but reserved the right to do so if the matter was not resolved satisfactorily. On day 9, something unexpected happened. I received a text message from my mother, asking if we could meet for coffee, just the two of us. I consulted with Stephanie, who advised caution, but thought it might be worth hearing what my mother had to say. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our homes. My mother looked tired, the lines around her eyes more pronounced than I remembered. She ordered a cappuccino but merely stirred it absently once it arrived. This has all gotten out of hand, she began. Your father is beside himself with anger. He feels betrayed that you would investigate his business affairs. I kept my expression neutral. I feel betrayed that you both lied to my daughter and stole her college fund, I replied evenly. My mother sighed. It was never supposed to be permanent, she insisted. We did intend to pay her back. When I asked, and why lie about a heart condition? Why not just ask for a loan honestly? She looked down at her untouched coffee. We did not think she would give it to us otherwise, she admitted quietly. And we had promised Chloe the car for her 16th birthday months ago. We could not disappoint her. The casual cruelty of this statement left me momentarily speechless. So it was acceptable to destroy Haley's college plans, to avoid disappointing Chloe about a luxury car. My mother must have seen the incredulity on my face. You have to understand, Amanda, she continued hastily. Things have been difficult financially. Your father's business has had some setbacks. We had to sell some investments at a loss to cover expenses. The money for Chloe's car just was not there. So you took it from Haley instead, I summarized coldly. She did not deny it. What do you want from us? She asked finally. I want you to return Haley's money, I said firmly. All of it, before her tuition payment is due next week. My mother shook her head. We cannot. It is gone. Spent. There is no way to get it back now. Then sell the car, I suggested. Return it. Get a refund. Do whatever you need to do, but find a way to make this right. Chloe would be devastated, my mother protested. She loves that car. And Haley is devastated about losing her college fund, I countered. Which is more important? A teenager's luxury car, or another teenager's education? My mother had no answer for that. She finished her coffee in silence, then stood to leave. I will talk to your father, she said, though she did not sound hopeful. But Amanda, if you pursue this legal action, if you file complaints about his business, you need to understand that there will be no coming back from that. You will no longer be welcome in the family. I looked at her steadily. When you chose to steal from my daughter, I replied, you made that decision for all of us. After she left, I sat there for a long time processing the conversation. My mother had essentially confirmed everything we had suspected. They had deliberately deceived Haley because they knew she would not have given them the money otherwise. They had prioritized Chloe's desire for a luxury car over Haley's education. And now they were threatening to cut me off from the family if I continued seeking justice. The choice in the end was simple. Haley was my family. Her future mattered more than maintaining relationships with people who had proven themselves unworthy of trust or respect. On day 10, exactly as specified in our demand letter, Maria Sanchez, the process server, delivered a thick envelope to my parents' home. Inside was not just another letter, but formal complaints prepared for submission to the State Real Estate Commission, the tax authority, and the district attorney's office, along with the evidence I had gathered about irregularities in my father's business practices. The complaints were not yet filed. That would be the next step if my parents failed to return Haley's money. But the message was clear: we were not bluffing, and we were prepared to escalate this matter as far as necessary. Now all we could do was wait to see if they would finally understand the seriousness of our resolve. Number Part 8, Justice and Healing. The response came more quickly than I had anticipated. Just 10 days after Maria Sanchez delivered the envelope containing our prepared complaints, my mother called. Her voice was tight, with suppressed emotion. We need to meet, she said without preamble. Your father and I, to discuss a resolution. I agreed, suggesting a meeting at Stephanie's office, rather than another coffee shop conversation that could easily go nowhere. My mother hesitated but eventually acquiesced. We set the meeting for the following day at 10 in the morning. That evening I explained the development to Haley. Do you think they will actually return the money? She asked, her expression a mixture of hope and skepticism. I do not know, I answered honestly. But the fact that they want to meet is a good sign. It means they are taking our threat seriously. Haley nodded, returning to the scholarship essay she was writing. She had applied for 27 different scholarships in the past 2 weeks, spending every free moment crafting personal statements and filling out applications. Her determination made my heart ache with pride, even as it fueled my resolve to make my parents accountable for what they had done. The next morning, Stephanie and I arrived at her office early to prepare for the meeting. We agreed on our strategy. We would listen to whatever offer my parents made, but we would accept nothing less than full restitution of the $37,000. If they balked, Stephanie would inform them that the complaints would be filed that same afternoon. My parents arrived precisely at 10. My father looked pale and drawn, with dark circles under his eyes, suggesting sleepless nights. My mother's usual perfect appearance was slightly disheveled, her hair not quite as neatly styled as usual. They sat stiffly in the chairs across from Stephanie's desk, their discomfort in this legal setting evident. Stephanie opened the meeting by thanking them for coming and expressing hope that we could resolve the matter amicably. Then she turned to my father, inviting him to speak. He cleared his throat. This whole situation has been blown completely out of proportion, he began, his tone defensive. What happened was a simple misunderstanding that has now escalated unnecessarily. Stephanie raised an eyebrow but said nothing, allowing him to continue. However, he went on, in the interest of family harmony and putting this unfortunate incident behind us, we are prepared to make an offer. He removed an envelope from his jacket pocket and placed it on the desk. Inside was a check for $15,000. This is all we can manage right now, my father explained. It represents a significant sacrifice on our part. We will pay the remainder in monthly installments of $1,000 until the debt is settled. I looked at the check, then at my father. This is not acceptable, I said firmly. Haley's tuition payment is due in 3 days. She needs the full amount now, not spread out over 2 years. My father's face reddened. This is more than generous, he insisted. You are in no position to dictate terms. Stephanie intervened smoothly. Actually, Mr. Wilson, your daughter is in exactly that position. We have prepared complaints for the State Real Estate Commission, the Tax Authority, and the District Attorney's Office documenting certain irregularities in your business practices that warrant investigation. If the full amount is not returned immediately, those complaints will be filed this afternoon. My father turned to me, his expression a mix of fury and disbelief. You would do this to your own father, he demanded. Destroy my reputation, possibly send me to jail. I met his gaze steadily. You would steal your granddaughter's future, I countered. Lie to her about having a life-threatening condition. Make her believe you might die just to get her money for a luxury car. My mother, who had been silent until now, suddenly burst into tears. It was not supposed to be like this, she sobbed. We were going to pay her back. We just needed the money for Chloe's car, and our investments had performed poorly, and your father's business has been struggling. My father shot her a warning look, but she continued, the words tumbling out. We thought we could replace the money before anyone noticed. Then you started investigating, and Harold was afraid of what you might find, and everything just spiraled out of control. Stephanie seized on this confession. So, you admit that you obtained the money fraudulently, she clarified. By falsely claiming Mr. Wilson needed emergency heart surgery. My mother nodded miserably, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. My father sat rigid in his chair, his jaw clenched. Stephanie looked at him directly. Mr. Wilson, given your wife's admission, I strongly advise you to return the full amount immediately. The alternative is not only the filing of these complaints but also potential criminal charges for fraud. The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Finally, my father reached for his phone. I need to make a call, he said stiffly. He stepped out of the office. Through the glass wall, I could see him pacing in the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, gesticulating occasionally. After about 15 minutes, he returned. I have arranged for a wire transfer, he announced without preamble. The full amount will be in Haley's account by close of business today. I will need her banking information. Relief washed over me, but I kept my expression neutral as I provided Haley's account details. Stephanie quickly drafted a document stating that upon receipt of the full $37,000, we would consider the matter resolved and would not pursue any legal action regarding either the fraudulently obtained funds or the business irregularities we had uncovered. My parents signed the agreement without further protest. As they prepared to leave, my father paused at the door. This changes everything, Amanda, he said coldly. Do not expect to be included in family gatherings going forward. As far as I am concerned, you and Haley are no longer part of this family. I had anticipated this threat, but hearing it spoken aloud still stung. Nevertheless, I remained calm. That is your choice, I replied. But you should know that Diane called me last night. My father frowned, clearly not expecting this. She wanted to know exactly what happened, I continued. I told her everything, including what you said about Haley not being real family. She was appalled. My mother made a small, distressed sound. My father's expression darkened further. So, while you may choose to exclude us from your version of family, I concluded you might find your definition becoming increasingly narrow. Diane is starting to see you both for who you really are. With that, they left. Stephanie turned to me with a small smile. You did it, she said. You got justice for Haley. I nodded, feeling a complex mixture of relief, vindication, and sadness. Yes, I had won this battle, but at the cost of whatever remaining family relationships might have been salvaged. Still, I knew I had made the right choice. Haley's future was worth fighting for, even at this price. That afternoon, we received confirmation that the wire transfer had been completed. The full $37,000 was back in Haley's college fund. When I told her, she burst into tears, but these were tears of relief and joy rather than the despair that had marked the past 2 weeks. We still had work to do. The emotional damage my parents had inflicted would take time to heal. Haley now struggled with trust issues that had not existed before. She had learned a harsh lesson about human nature at an age when most people still believe in the essential goodness of others, especially family. But we moved forward. Haley left for Cornell as planned, her financial situation secure once more. I remained in our apartment, continuing my marketing job and the freelance work I had taken on during the crisis. The extra income, no longer desperately needed for tuition, went into a new emergency fund. I had learned the importance of having a financial safety net. As for my parents, the consequences of their actions extended beyond the return of the money. Diane did indeed struggle with what she had learned about them. She called me regularly now, something she had rarely done before, often seeking reassurance that she was not like our parents. She began limiting Chloe's time with her grandparents, concerned about the values they might instill in her. The luxury car remained a point of contention. Diane initially suggested that Chloe should return it now that she knew where the money had come from. But my parents had found another way to repay Haley, likely liquidating investments at a loss or taking out a loan. The car stayed a symbol of their misplaced priorities, but no longer a direct theft from my daughter. 6 months after the confrontation in Stephanie's office, I received a surprising call from my mother. She asked if we could meet again, this time without my father's knowledge. Cautiously, I agreed. She looked older when I saw her, diminished somehow. I have been thinking about what happened, she began hesitantly. About what we did to Haley. She paused, then added softly, "What I did. I cannot blame this entirely on your father." I waited, unsure where this was heading. "It was wrong," she admitted. "Deeply, unforgivably wrong. I let my favoritism for Diane and Chloe blind me to the harm we were causing." She looked down at her hands. "I do not expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what we destroyed. Not just Haley's trust, but any relationship we might have had with either of you." I did not know how to respond. Part of me wanted to embrace this apparent remorse, to believe that my mother had genuinely changed. Another part remained skeptical, wary of being manipulated once again. "Thank you for saying that," I finally replied. "It means something to hear you acknowledge what happened. As for forgiveness or rebuilding relationships, that would take time and consistent evidence of change. Not just words, but actions." She nodded, accepting this without protest. "Could I write to Haley?" she asked. "Not to ask for forgiveness, just to apologize properly." I considered this. "That would be up to Haley," I said. "I can ask if she would be open to receiving a letter from you." When I relayed the conversation to Haley during our weekly video call, she was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe someday," she finally said. "But not yet. I am still figuring out how I feel about everything." I respected her decision. Healing could not be rushed or forced to follow someone else's timeline. 4 years later, I sat in the audience at Cornell's graduation ceremony, watching as Haley, now 22, walked across the stage to receive her diploma in biological engineering. She had thrived in college, despite the difficult start, making friends, conducting research, and even securing a job offer from a prestigious biotech firm in Boston. My parents were not there. My father had never shown any remorse for what he had done, and my mother's tentative steps toward reconciliation had stalled when he discovered her meeting with me. They remained estranged from us, though Diane and Chloe had become more frequent presences in our lives. Watching Haley accept her diploma, I felt a profound sense of vindication. My parents had tried to steal her future, but we had fought back and won. More importantly, the experience had taught us both valuable lessons about resilience, justice, and the true meaning of family. Family is not just about blood relations or shared DNA. Real family consists of the people who support you, who celebrate your successes and help you through your failures, who would never manipulate or deceive you for their own gain, who see your worth as a person, not as an extension of themselves or a means to an end. By that definition, Haley and I were family in the truest sense, and as she turned to find me in the crowd, her face alight with accomplishment and joy, I knew that was all that really mattered. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who betrayed your trust? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might be dealing with difficult family situations. Remember, sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we are born into. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength and courage in all your relationships.